All right, I'm joined by senior editor Alex Sear and managing editor Katelyn Tossi. Gang, we've gathered together today to discuss everything you need to know about the first marathon major of the calendar year, the Tokyo Marathon, which takes place March 2nd. March 2nd, Tokyo time. We'll get into the specifics of how and when you can watch the Tokyo Marathon broadcast, live stream. We'll talk about that later in the podcast. But first, we're going to break down the history of this race, which is a really interesting history that kind of surprised me when I started researching this. And as well as, yes, we'll talk about the elite race later on as well. It's a pretty exciting elite race this year. And various fun facts about Tokyo, how you get into the damn thing, because it's, I think, a little bit of a mysterious race in terms of entry. There is a lottery. We'll talk all about the dates, how many people enter the lottery, whether it's realistic if you're going to get in or not, and then what the experience is like, what the course is like, what the race itself is like as well. First things first, start time. I think we've figured it out. We've done the math. We've Googled time zones.
It took all three of us. But
Yep.
Yes.
But
Okay.
we did it.
For full clarity's sake, it starts local time 9:10 a.m. in Tokyo.
Mm-hmm.
However, that is, Alex,
that's 14 hours ahead of
Right.
us in Eastern time. New York time will be Boston specifically at that time,
Yes.
Boston time. And so that's great, right? For us, it's at 7:10 p.m. And so no
Perfect.
more antisocial experience of watching a marathon at 3 a.m. This is like watching a hockey game. Just get your chips, your beer, your friends, sit in front of the TV and watch the marathon.
And we'll all be together.
Yes.
that's right. The
Yes.
three of us, yes, this is no plug intended, but the three of us
Mhm.
are going to be together for the Boston Run Show. We're going to do a live podcast on the Saturday on the floor of the Boston Run Show on one of the stages. And Saturday evening, we will watch Tokyo together. We'll huddle around, hopefully a TV. Hopefully we can get it on a TV and not just like one
The
of
computer.
our laptops.
Yeah.
And we'll cover it as well. We'll do some live coverage. I think we might even check out our YouTube channel. I think we're going to try to see if we can set up some sort of watch along thing where we kind of live pod what we're seeing and what our thoughts are on the race as it unfolds. Certainly the elite race as well. Try to set that up. So that's going to be Saturday evening Eastern time. What a civilized experience this is. It almost makes me it's like, why can't I, for running purposes, you don't want to put a marathon at 7 p.m. Eastern time on a Saturday night, but for viewing experience, it's awesome, right? So it's like, it feels like real sports. Okay. So we've got that sorted out. This year, 37,500 runners have entered and will start the Tokyo Marathon. So it's a big one, but it doesn't quite compare in terms of the girth of the race, the population at the start line as a New York or a London. It's
Well,
those
like
races.
Boston, right?
Yeah, it's like a
Yeah.
Boston sort of size, which is still a lot of people. And of course, it is one of the World Marathon Majors, as we mentioned. There are now 7 for us to consider, and it's the first one of the year. So we've got ourselves 3 in the spring, 4 in the fall, and later on we're gonna power rank them, and we're going to talk about whether or not we're gonna do a little scoring here, how we feel about Tokyo vis-a-vis the other marathon majors. Katelyn, there's also another event. Not many marathon majors have a secondary race, but Tokyo has a secondary race.
Yep, but it's not a 10K. It's a 10.7K. So you can't work on your 10K PR, but they've got
you
this
can
race.
certainly get a 10.7K PR.
Yeah. So I think there are about 500 people running, I saw, or something like that. A
it's pretty small.
10.7K starts at the same time.
Yeah, it's a pretty small race.
Yeah.
It fills the field out to 38,000 total runners.
Yeah.
So it's a 500 person race,
Yeah.
very exclusive race. No idea why it's 10.7K, but it's 10.7K. So there you go. If you're looking for that 10.7K personal best, you can travel to Tokyo and get it done. 2012 was the first year the Tokyo was included as a world marathon major. There is a 7-hour cutoff for the race. So if you're considering running it, you do need to get under the wire under 7 hours to get it done. I think that's a fair amount of time to get a marathon completed in.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk a little bit about the history of this race.
We've broken it down into facts.
Fun
Five.
facts.
Five facts.
Facts.
So
All
let's
right.
not waste any time. Fact
Okay.
1.
Go into it.
The Tokyo Marathon is, as it stands right now, is not as historic as one might think. Now, there's a huge running culture in Japan that's existed for a really long time, but this marathon has only existed since 2007. Like we mentioned before then, there were 2 competing marathons or 2 events that alternated from year to year. And that stems back in 1981 when both happened. So there was one called the Tokyo International Marathon, and then also the Tokyo New York Friendship International, you guessed it, marathon. So that's
What a
mouthful.
title for a race.
Oh my God, this is about as long as the race. And so both happened in 1981, and after that, they alternated from year to year. And these marathons were elite only. So on brand with that running boom back of the 70s and 80s, it was kind of like you run them fast or you don't run them at all. So pretty exclusive. And even more so, they were just for men. There was a separate marathon for women. What's it called? The Tokyo International Women's Marathon, of course, that happened from 79 all the way to 2008.
And that brings us to fun fact number 2.
Fact 2.
Fact 2. In 1979, it was the first legit women's only marathon. So what Alex mentioned, the Tokyo International Women's Marathon was the first one, and it inspired the inclusion of the women's marathon into the 1984 Los Angeles Olympic Games. 1984, that seems really late to have the women's marathon included. Doesn't that feel super late?
It feels super late.
You guys were both young adults by then.
Thanks, Alex. You know what? Let's just start off with
I was alive. Yeah. I don't remember the 84 Olympics. I don't remember Joan Benoit Samuelson crossing the finish line in LA Coliseum, but we've watched the YouTube clips. It is crazy that 84 was the first time that the women's marathon was ever held in the Olympics. That's bananas. Yep. It's shameful, but it is what it is. There's still this weird history of men's and women's marathons and races in Japan. Won't go into that, but there still is history. There still are women. There's still a women's only race. There's still a men's only. I believe Lake Biwa Marathon is a men's only race. And there are a couple of really high level elite women's only marathons as well. Fact number 3.
Fact 3.
The race is sponsored by the Tokyo Metro, which is the subway company in Japan, in Tokyo. And I learned in doing some intrepid Googling and Wikipedia reading, this is kind of appalling to me, but there are not one, but 2 subway companies in Tokyo, which makes a certain level of sense when you think about it, because the Tokyo subway system is gigantic.
Mm-hmm.
And there is, in fact, 2 companies that run it. Tokyo Metro, which is, I believe, the bigger of the 2, and is a private corporation, if I'm not mistaken, because the other is owned by the city government, is the sponsor of this race.
Fact 4.
So intense.
Hit me with the most confusing of the 5 facts. So let's do a quick rundown of recent years in Tokyo, and specifically through the COVID years, because if you don't have many memories of the Tokyo Marathon the last few years, maybe this is why. So 2020, we don't remember anything that happened pre-COVID in the first couple of months, but Tokyo was one of the last races to happen before the world truly shut down. So they had a very small version of the race. So only elites, 165 runners total. Like, if you remember, those were in the weeks when, like, you could kind of squeeze out an event, but some countries had already locked their, like, it was a really precarious early March time, right? So
this would be like right before, I think the real kind of like the weird marker of the beginning of COVID, at least in the United
Right.
States, was the cancellation of the NBA season, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Remember when it was announced? I think it was like it was on a Friday. I remember I remember where I was moment in history, right? I was in I think Orlando airport. I was in a Florida airport, standing in the airport when I found out it happened. This event just squeezed in right before that, right? And but obviously there was still an incredible amount of awareness because it was an elite only event. So 165 runners total.
Yes. That led to a full cancellation in 2021. So this is when COVID was really taking off and nothing was happening in those early months of 2021. That race was deferred, 2022. And in 2022, still there were no overseas runners allowed. So basically, COVID hampered this race for 3 years.
Okay. Fun fact 5.
Fact 5.
It is the second Japan has the second oldest average age of any country in the world, trailed only by Monaco. And the Tokyo Marathon has the oldest field of runners out of the 7 world major marathons. So in 2024, close to 50% of the runners in the Tokyo Marathon were 50 years of age or older.
Amazing.
It's like trail running. I love it. Trail running is like, you got the 40, 50, 60s. It's, it reminded me of that. So awesome.
So if Alex runs his debut in Tokyo, a debut marathon, there's a higher likelihood that he's going to get dusted by a 55-year-old than, say, New York or Boston.
Right.
That's why I'm petrified of doing it. That stat's crazy. I wonder if it's because we know that there is a very quickly aging population in Japan, so that I think the population lends itself to that. But I wonder how much of it also has to do with just a culture of health that extends deep into people's lives. Like there are a lot of, ever since there was a Netflix documentary about the blue zones, and everyone's talking about the blue zones, parts of the world where people tend to live longer and live healthier for most of their lives. One of the blue zones was not in Tokyo, but Okinawa, Japan. And you got to think that's probably embedded in the culture that people tend to stay fit and active for longer. So I wonder how much of it is just population getting older, but how much of it is kind of a positive cultural thing.
We have a blue zone here in Costa Rica, in Nicoya. I think Nicoya, Costa Rica is one of the blue zones as well. So we've got some great longevity. Yeah.
Pretty sure Toronto, Ontario is not a... We had the same thought as we're dragging under 3 feet of snow.
Exactly. We should hat tip there to stats nerd and runner Brian Rock, who I've had that back and forth with, and I think he's going to contribute a little bit to what we do at Marathon Handbook here and there. He loves to crunch numbers like this, and he did a whole piece on the average age of all of the marathon majors, and he was the one who calculated that Tokyo is in fact the oldest overall marathon major in the world. Okay, let's get into talking about the course. I think it's one of the special attributes of Tokyo. It's a real appealing factor, especially if you're going to travel literally to the other side of the world. If you're living in North America, as two of us are, I guess. Katelyn, you're technically not in North America, but you're a North American in absentia, and it would be a hell of a trip for you to get to Tokyo as well.
Yes, it would.
Yeah. So when you're traveling to the other side of the world to run a marathon, a goal race, you might want it to be fast, right? You might be going after a personal best in the marathon. At the very least, you don't want to be climbing up paved mountains and down them. Tokyo is extremely, extremely forgiving. I mean, it's a pretty beautiful course. Runs right through the heart of the city. You can check off a lot of the historic sightseeing boxes during your run, which is super fun. Takes you out into some nice suburbs as well. It's a really nice course. And it is, to employ the great cliche in referring to a course, pancake flat.
Pancake flat.
After its little downhill at the beginning.
Right.
I'm noticing that a lot of the majors are designed that way. They start on a bit of a downhill.
Mhm.
Boston
Yeah,
is
get you
like
going.
that. Yes, London is like that. New York is like that. You really fall off a cliff early on. It's nice, but it's tough. I think that's probably misleading for some runners because they lock into a fast pace early on, and then they feel like they have to hold it when things get flat. But overall, yeah, it's fast. Like you can't argue that Tokyo isn't fast. And the nice thing about the time of year, March in Tokyo has almost perfect weather for running a marathon, right? To say the average temperature, the best temperature that you can ask for to run a marathon is somewhere around 8 degrees Celsius. In
Mhm.
March in Tokyo, it's between 9 and 14 on average. So that's pretty close to the range. And it rains roughly 25% of the time, which is not so bad. One rainy day out of 4. I like my odds on a marathon day.
I checked the forecast for Tokyo the other day, and it was saying 64 for the high, 52 for the low Fahrenheit. Come on, do the quick math. Help me. For Celsius, 52. 52 is nice. Ooh.
That sounds pretty good.
It sounds good.
I'm just like, I'm doing a quick search here. This is great podcasting. It's 11 degrees, 52. That's
Okay.
pretty good. That's
Okay.
pretty good. Pretty
That should be
optimal, I'd
good.
say, for this time of year. If you've been training in the winter, it's probably feels a little on the warm side, but a totally great temperature for running a personal best. Yeah, that first 5K is a pretty good drop of like, I'm eyeballing like maybe about 35 meters of elevation drop in the first 5K. So like a pretty precipitous, we'll call it a nice downhill in the first 5K to get you moving. And then after that, it's like more or less flat. There's like a little bump of a few meters at like 37K. You got to climb for about a kilometer. There's an up and then it goes down again very quickly. So, and that's very, very negligible. So overall, very fast course. Comparing this course to, Katelyn's chuckling already.
Because we're looking at the elevation. We have the elevation in front of us to all of the majors. And I'm laughing because the Boston Marathon literally looks like one of my trail ultras, which is just like up and down and up and down. I don't even know how I'm going to do this, guys. I have to reevaluate my time goal, I think, looking at this elevation chart.
Katelyn is running the Boston Marathon in April. And as you can tell, it might be a slight bit nervous staring at these,
Yes.
especially the comparison charts. It's like you look at Chicago.
Yeah.
It's like there's not a single divot in the entire course elevation, the profile. London, very similar to like London, New York, Tokyo, well, even Boston, of course. They all have like a pretty good downhill to start the race. And then, London, Tokyo, level off. Chicago doesn't have a single mark on it. It's just flat all the way through. Boston's a nosedive, and then you get into the hills in the second half. So Tokyo, I think actually, like if you're looking for just pure PR course, like I think Tokyo might be the most advantageous course of all of the marathon majors. I would say maybe Chicago is the most honest course because it's just like a time trial. It's totally flat.
Right.
Berlin has actually got a couple little bumps in the second half, but I mean, nothing substantial. And then London has got a little complexity to it as well, but is ultimately a flat course. Really, historically, New York and Boston and now Sydney are your challenging marathon major courses, whereas Tokyo looks like a gift. Looks great.
Yeah.
I think the challenge with Tokyo for many North American runners, and especially emphasis on the North, Canada and Northern US, is that you have to train through the winter. That's the tough part.
Right.
Right.
A lot
But
of
if you're
treadmill
in
running.
Yes, but if you're in a temperate area, it's fine. I will remind North American listeners that the North American record for men was run in Tokyo in 2023.
Oh, yeah.
Cam Levin's 205, right? So you can run fast there.
Yeah, and that was a huge breakthrough for him. Like he lowered his time by a good amount as well.
Like
So
2
you can
minutes.
go there, and if you're elite, you can go there and run a fast time. And if you're not an elite, and if you're a mere mortal like this, well, at least the two of us, Katelyn and I, and Alex is.
Oh, have I ascended in the
He's
in the mortal power rankings?
Are you sub elite or sub elite? I'm not sure if we've cracked the sub. You're sub elite. We'll put you in the sub elite.
Sure.
Yeah, we'll give you sub elite. But for us recreational runners,
Mm-hmm.
you know, Tokyo is a place where you can go and run a personal best. You can run a Boston qualifier. Maybe, you know, if you're in that shape. So let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll do a few fun things. We'll totally arbitrarily power rank the 7 world marathon majors. We're also going to give Tokyo, what are we going to call this? Like the marathon handbook score. We're going to give it a score. We're going to give it a score out of 100 in terms of like the caliber of the event based on a few categories that we've come up with. I'm going to answer the big question of whether or not this is on each of our bucket lists for doing a marathon. We're going to talk about the elite field, and we're also going to talk about how the heck you get into the Tokyo Marathon, because it's a bit tricky. Okay, we'll be right back. March 1st and 2nd, Alex, Katelyn, and I are going to do a live podcast from the floor of the Boston Run Show. It's basically like a running expo with all of the latest and upcoming shoes and gear, minus you having to run a race that weekend. So swing by, you can get tickets. I'll make sure I put it in the show notes where you can get the tickets. Our podcast is going to be live on the stage on the Saturday, so March 1st. Swing by, say hi, bring some swag too to give out, which will be fun. And also keep an eye on our feeds on our site. We're going to do live coverage of the Tokyo Marathon that weekend. And because Alex and Katelyn and I are all together, we'll do a live instant reaction podcast, 3 of us together, after we've watched and covered Tokyo Marathon. So keep an eye on that as well. All right, and we're back. The World Marathon Majors. Maybe you've heard of them. The 7 biggest, most important, impressive, hardest to get into marathons in the world. This is going to be a fun little test. Alex, here, right off the top of your head, can you name the World 7 Marathon Majors in order? Go.
In order? Oh boy. In order. Okay, so Tokyo.
Yep.
Boston. London. Oh God, when does Sydney happen? Berlin. Berlin. I don't know when Sydney is. Chicago.
Sydney's before Berlin, I think, right?
Okay,
it's in late August.
So then Sydney, Berlin, Chicago, New York.
You got it. All right.
Nice.
Sydney's throwing me off.
I know. Well, Sydney's the newbie. Sydney was just added. It was announced in New York last fall. So it's the 7th one now. So we've got to consider Sydney. A lot of buzz around Sydney because it's the new guy. We're going to power rank the World Marathon Majors. And what do I mean by power ranking? I mean like a purely subjective, arbitrary ranking of the 7 races. I think we kind of have to do this in 2 ways. We have to do this as like what we think the runners' perception of the marathon majors are right now, like most desirable, popular, like the biggest race down to the 7th in terms of the marathon majors. And then we can talk about our own personal rankings of like sort of like what race we want to do more or are more interested in or think more highly of. Okay. Not to friggin' convolute this even further. Katelyn, what you got? Give me your top 7 power rankings of like what you think the order is of magnitude of these events.
Okay. Mine is pretty similar to what I think, but I'll go with what I think runners think. I'm going to put Boston at the top, and Boston is my top because I don't think it's the biggest marathon, but I think a lot of runners, if you're a marathon runner, you kind of have that dream of one day I want to be able to get into Boston and I want to run Boston because it's prestigious and it's historic and it's the oldest marathon. And so I feel like that's kind of there, even though it's not accessible. People think they really want to run it. They get excited about it. So I would put that as number 1. Then I'm going to go with London because London almost had almost a million applicants into the lottery last year. So I think that's a huge one on people's list, followed by New York because also of the popularity and the sheer size of the race and the excitement and clearly just comments that I've heard from everyone about New York. You have to run New York. You have to run New York. You have to run New York. So that's 3. Then I would go with Chicago just because of the size. Berlin, Tokyo, and Sydney, because Sydney's new. So I think it's just kind of getting on the map and it's probably not as popular quite yet. So that's my power ranking of what I think other runners want.
Poor Sydney.
For Sydney. It'll get there. It'll get there. Yeah.
Sierra, what do you got? I'm curious to hear what your rankings are.
I have an issue. Katelyn just plucked my ranking.
No way.
Pound for pound.
Exactly the same?
Exactly the same.
Holy-
Exactly
Oh.
the same. So the only thing I'll add is it went a top 3 for me. Totally Boston, London, New York.
Yeah.
I picked Boston because it's there. You can't beat the history.
Mhm.
And after that, the last 4 were hard to scramble, except for
Yep.
Sydney was my dead last. You need to prove yourself. But Chicago usurped Berlin in number 4 because now that to me is known as the fast marathon, and people who
Right.
care about a fast marathon are going to go to Chicago. But I still think people care in general will care more about the experience than the speed of a race. And so those Chicago Berlins will go 4-5. I think Tokyo is a sleeper. In fact, I just think many of the conversations that we have here are with North Americans because that's the side of the world that we're on. And a race in March, as mentioned, is not as appealing for a lot of us. And so Tokyo's the race that comes and goes, and a lot of people in the Western Hemisphere miss it, and then we lose a bit of the magic. So I think it's a big sleeper. If you go to Tokyo and you see what it's like, and one day when I do race it, that might change in my own ranking, which I'll get into. But I just think one day. Yeah, but I think that's the sleeper pick. But right now, its perception is number 6.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm zagging on you guys. I got New York. I got New York number 1. It's the
You
biggest
love New
marathon.
York.
It's the biggest marathon in the world. I feel like it's the most important marathon in the world. It feels like the gravitational force in running. It's a truly international race. It's crazy, and I just feel like it's the biggest race. I got London second because just as you said, Katelyn, the desire, the demand to get into this race is now through the roof. It's like you said, I think it was 880,000 plus lottery entrants last year to get in. Also a 50,000 person race. So knocking on the door of New York. I think it very briefly had the world record for the most number of finishers this year before New York came along and took the crown back. I got Boston third because, as you have both highlighted already, the history of the race, the import of the race. I mean, that it's cultivated this allure because it is so exclusive, and it is able to still maintain that exclusivity, even though running is such an inclusive sport. It's intriguing and very powerful. Its brand is big. I got Chicago 4, and I got Chicago ahead of Berlin at 5 because, as you said, Alex, those world records in Chicago, for people who want to run fast, I think Berlin had a great pull for many years because the world records were always run there. And it was like, well, if the world records are run there, it must be really quick. The course must be really conducive to running a personal best. If I'm a recreational runner who wants to achieve a personal best, I'm going to go to where the world record is run. Now that's Chicago, both of them. So I got Chicago 4, Berlin 5. I got Sydney 6 ahead of Tokyo because I think,
really?
Well, because it's unknown, because it's new. It's the shiny new toy. So I got it slightly ahead of Tokyo, and I agree with you, Alex. I think even though I've got Tokyo at number 7, dead last among the marathon majors rankings in the eyes of the average runner that I perceive, I think Tokyo is a real, massively underrated event that I'm super, super curious about. And we can talk in a second about bucket list events. Just in terms of your own power rankings, we'll go Alex first. What's your own personal, if you're going to create a bucket list of okay, here's the 7 marathon majors, you're going to do them all. You're also going to cover them all as a journalist. You're going to watch the elite race as a fan of running. I know it's a lot of different things to think about at the same time. How do they stack up for you?
Okay, well, let me just start off by saying that as a sub-elite athlete, I will be
Go on.
operating at a level that you guys might not understand.
Oh,
And so don't
Oh,
worry
wow.
okay.
No,
We
this is
couldn't
this is
possibly. It's a different experience he's doing.
this is my code way of saying that my ranking is super lame. And I haven't actually ranked it based on covering the event. I ranked it on the ones that I want to do the most.
Cool.
And the first marathon that I'm going to want to do the most is going to be the one where I think I can run fastest. And that has to do with course, but it also has to do with my own displacement and traveling halfway across the world to Japan and racing a few days later is probably not all
It is
that
tough.
conducive to a fast time. I
Right.
go there,
Tough.
maybe you go there for a training camp for a few weeks if you're a professional athlete, but again, sub-elite, not elite. I'm not going to do that. And so the race that makes me run fastest, I think, is Chicago. So that's number one on my list. That's probably the first one
Mhm.
that I'm going to end up doing. And
Good
so,
call.
so power list
Yeah.
number one is Chicago. I put Tokyo at number two.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Because that is high on my list of just general things I want to do in life is I want to go and spend some time in Japan, like do a long extended trip. And I would love to fit the Tokyo Marathon in there just because I know a lot about Boston just from living close to there, New York as well. I want to learn more about Tokyo and I want to do that. So that's my number two. I put London over Boston kind of for the same things. I'm a bit
'Cause it's
attracted to the
faster.
unknown. It's faster also, and I'm attracted to the unknown. Boston, I've been there. I've covered it. It's awesome. I want to run it one day. It's my number 4. New York City, my number 5. Berlin 6. So Berlin is much faster than New York and Boston, but I'm thinking if I'm gearing up to run a fast marathon, I'll just do Chicago. Berlin is like kind of an understudy of that. And so I don't have much use to run that in the next year or two. And then again, I put Sydney 7. Michael, I don't know. Like, I don't think Sydney deserves a spot other than last until it proves itself in one way or the other.
Dude, you're so harsh. Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. Caitlin, what's your thinking? I'm curious to hear.
Okay.
Because you're
On
running
this one-
Boston in April. Like,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
hoping
of course.
Boston's up there for you because you're doing it.
It is, and I did not steal Alex's list for this one. They're extremely different. You'll see. So yes, Boston is number 1 because I'm going there in April. And since I am not a sub-elite, and of course I do want to get a PR and I do want to do a great time, but that wasn't number 1 for me right now. So I want to go back to Boston. It has a big story for me, a lot of history. I grew up there. So Boston's number 1. And it will be my first major in this my running experience. So number 2, I have London because just the way that you guys covered it and I saw it and I watched it, I got super excited. The history, it would be an amazing trip. So London is number 2 on my list. And number 3, for the same reasons, everyone talking about it, New York is number 3. So I'm not choosing
That's a good one.
extremely fast courses for my 1, 2, and 3 because 1 and 3, Boston and London aren't that fast. I'm more choosing them for other reasons. Going to London, super cool. Well, London is a flat course. New York, not flat, a slower race, but it's supposed to be amazing. Then I've got Berlin and Tokyo. Those to me would be amazing trips. I would just love to go, like Alex is saying. I would really love to go to Japan. I would love to go to Berlin and like soak up the rich history. Then I've got Chicago. Chicago's almost last for me. It just doesn't draw me in like the other majors do. And then I've also got Sydney for last because it also has to prove it's worth its weight in gold to me.
Michael's going to be like, Sydney's my
Sydney number 1.
No, it's not. I think similarly to you guys about the Sydney situation. My number 1's New York City. I have run it once before. I was supposed to run it the year it was canceled in 2012 due to Hurricane Sandy. If you remember that situation, it was a real catastrophe on many levels. New York's number 1. It's the greatest race in the world. I ran it covering it as a journalist, so it was a really weird experience because I was sort of fun running it. I'd like to go and run it for real as a personal quest, and it's just a wild experience. I mean, you get to run through like New York City. They shut it down for you for a day. It's crazy.
Very cool.
And it's the best city in the world to be in after a marathon too. Number 2, London. Went and watched my wife race it last year and covered it as well. And geez, that's a good race. Super well organized, massive. London is a really neat city to visit. Number 3, Tokyo. Definitely want to go there and spend some time there and run that fast course as well. I think Tokyo is like a have it all destination race, right? It's like really cool place to go visit. A place you can make a long trip out of it, go for a couple of weeks, take it all in, travel around the country a little bit as well. For, people in North America, totally different cultural experience as well. But then also a super flat and fast and serious race that you can go and run really well at with, 37,499 of your friends, right? So got Berlin 4, Chicago 5, just because I've run Chicago 5 times already. So I'm like, okay, I've done. But Chicago's a great race. It's exactly as you described, Alex. It's like perfect for somebody who lives within a 2-hour flight of Chicago in North America. You can pop in for a weekend, run a PR, get the heck out of Dodge. Eat that weird deep dish pizza. Yeah. I got Sydney 6th, never been to Australia, and I got Boston last.
Whoa.
I can't believe this. As you're listing them off, I'm like, what's going on with Michael? Where's Boston?
I got Boston last just because I have been to Boston covering that race and running that race so many times. I love it. I'm taking it for granted. It's like, it's like a parent. You just take them for granted until you realize one day just how much they've done for you. Okay.
Oh, God.
Jeez, guys.
That got deep.
Yeah. Sorry. Okay. Let's pivot quickly here. Okay. Let's take a quick break. And then we're going to get into how you get in to the Tokyo Marathon. We're going to look at the elite race, and we're also going to give Tokyo a score out of 100 in terms of where we put this race overall in terms of quality of race. Okay, we'll be right back. Before we get back to the podcast, I wanted to suggest you to sign up to our newsletter, which goes out now every single morning of the week, 5:05 Eastern Time, in your inbox. Got a new teammate, Brady Homer, who is writing a special newsletter on Fridays. He focuses on sports science and the latest in terms of training, nutrition. It's absolutely excellent. Brady, if you know him, if you follow him on X, is a really smart guy and has really interesting points of view. Shares it all every single Friday. It's a must read, I'd say. Join 227,000 other runners who subscribe, and I'll put a link in the show notes so it's easy for you to sign up. All right, back to the show. All right, we're back. We're going to talk about how Tokyo ranks overall. I think this is a concept, a project that we're going to build on at Marathon Handbook more in the future. Been musing about putting together like a big overall, kind of like how the New York Times does like their destinations or like, X number of places that you need to travel to in 2025. They release in January every year that I just love devouring and going through. It's like a totally subjective list of a bunch of great places to travel to, just to put the idea in your head. I think we're going to do the same thing for running events of all different stripes: marathons, trail races, 5Ks, I guess track races that you can even do all those not very many track races that the average person can go run around the world. But we're going to put together like this kind of fascinating oddball list down the line. Sort of thinking about that, like how do you like evaluate a race? We've come up with some, I guess they're pretty arbitrary points of interest for every race, but I think you can kind of fit most races into these five, to evaluate these 5 categories, guys. So we did running experience. We call it a bucket list rating, the elite race, whether it's fast, good for running a PB, PR, whatever you want to call it, and then its reputation score. So these are the 5 categories we're evaluating this race on. We're going to score each one out of 10. Then we're going to do a little quick math to give you a score out of 100. Just feel like a score out of 100 gives you like a really like clear evaluation of what we think of this event. Alex, running experience, what do you got? What's your score out of 10?
Okay, so running, I'm going all 5. I'm going to list them all 5. So running experience,
sure.
I have as an 8. It seems like people really like it. All I need to know is like, is it as seamless to be there? What happens after the race? Where do you go after the race? What is it before? This is the thing I'm still trying to find out. Before the race, that's a huge thing with races. And I'm like going into the half marathon and full marathon worlds, like the wake up, the time from when you wake up to the start line will separate races between good and bad. I hate these chaotic starts. If you're waiting, freezing somewhere for 2 hours before the race, I hate that. I love good organization. And if the subway system in Japan is any indicator, I bet that they have this down pat. So I'm giving it an 8 for now. Bucket list rating, I have a 10, just because, as I said, I want to be there. That is totally a race that's on my bucket list. Couldn't be any more. Elite race, I give it an 8, which is pretty high. They get very elite fields every year. The only thing that they struggle with in terms of depth, I think, is attracting a lot of American and, I mean, to a smaller extent, Canadian runners. Not that there are that many Canadian runners on the elite circuit, but to counter that, they have a massive Japanese presence. We'll get into the elites later, but it's a very deep elite field, men's and women's side every year. Speed PR also gave it an 8. Look, North American record was run there. You have many athletes on the men's side going under 206 every year, sub 220s very often on the women's side. It's a fast race. We've talked about this. That's an 8. Reputation is where it lacks. 7. I give it a 7. And this is like 0 is like not the worst marathon major to me. 0 is like a race that no one's ever heard of. It's like your little turkey trot. And
it's poorly run. Yeah.
Yeah, like you're leading and you go the wrong way because no one's telling you where to go. That's
there.
Your 0.
Oh yeah.
So Tokyo is still very high on that everything list, but I give it a 7 just because it has a bit of a marketing issue in North America.
Yeah.
It doesn't, and I mean, look at us talk. We say we're ranking it 5th and 6th, and I'm quite certain that it's an amazing event. We just don't know enough about it because it's not blasted everywhere like Boston is, or like New York is, or even like London is. And so I'm giving it a 7. And so all of that together, quick maths, 41, just over 8 out of 10. So that's an 82 over 100.
Okay.
82 out of 100. 82% score by Alex Sear. Just marking this down. Katelyn, what do you got? Let's go through it.
So for running experience, quite for the same number of reasons that Alex mentioned, I gave it a 9 out of 10. I feel like that race has got to be absolutely amazing. The route, the places that you're running by, just incredible. And the organization is supposed to be top tier. So I gave it a 9 on the running experience side. For the bucket list rating, I gave it a 7, a little bit lower than Alex, because I just think it needs to get a little more pushed up there for people. Like you're saying, like a little more marketing. It's gotta yell a little louder so we know more about it to get it on people's lists. So that was a 7. The elite race, I also gave it a little lower score. I gave it a 7 because I feel like what we've been discussing about how flat this race is and how fast this race is, why aren't we finding world records there? So maybe they need to bump up and get even more of the bigger names at this race so we can really see what Tokyo can give us with times. And so that goes right into speed. I think I gave it a 10 because I feel like it has the potential to have that sort of caliber, world record caliber, if we get the right people running the race, and that it would be an excellent place to run a PR because of the lack of elevation. Gain and loss. And reputation, a 7, just like Alex, for the same reason. We just need it to be a little more publicized all around the world so people get more into it. So that gave me a total score of 80 out of 100. Very close.
Okay, you guys are similar here. You got an 80. Yep. Write this down here. You got an 80. Okay. My number's a little higher.
Okay.
Running experience, I got it at a 9.5 out of 10 because this is a world marathon major. This is at the tippy top of all marathon experiences. The course is great.
Mm-hmm.
The landmarks you see are wonderful. It's got a great course in terms of running quickly. It's extremely well organized. Done a little research, talked to a couple of friends who've run the event. Unsurprisingly, it is extremely well organized and easily accessible. Bucket list rating, 9.5. Because
Well,
for me, it's just one of these races that, like, if you're going to do a big travel experience to a major marathon, and obviously this is a North American bias, we're seeing this through our lens, then yeah, this is very, very high up there. What a cool place to go to, right? Elite race, I've got it at an 8. I was tempted to go even lower, as I believe you did, Caitlin,
yep.
because I agree with you. This is one of these races where you look at the course, you look at the course profile, and you're thinking to yourself, like, okay, we'll talk a little bit about the elite races in a bit here. But until last year, you know, the even actually Kipchoge a couple years ago ran quite quickly, but we've never seen a world record in Tokyo before. And it feels like it's a course that should produce that. I think they're just getting sort of like, sometimes they're getting a little bit of the B team in terms of elite runners.
Mm-hmm.
And it might just be because it comes so early in the season. They may pay less money for you to come and race as an elite runner. I don't know. I don't have that information. But it's just like a little bit of a softer elite race typically than the other marathon majors. Although we'll get into the elite race and there's some really intriguing storylines. Speed, 9.5. Because then again, as you said, Caitlin, look at the course profile. It's like this thing is just begging for you to run your personal best on. Reputation, I put it at 8.5. I agree that there's just like a little bit of work I feel like needs to be done. Like, I don't mean we need to have like social media influencers crawling all over the place. We don't need friggin' Matt Choi and his clown group of guys on e-bikes following him around.
No.
Doing like a, Instagramming the hell out of it. Like, we don't need that. We don't need that extreme. But it's like, it's a little bit of a black box, I'd say, certainly for the Western world. And that's an us problem more than a them problem, right? But so overall, I've got a 91. I've scored this at 91
Nice and
out of
high.
100.
Okay.
Yeah. But I feel like that makes sense. I feel like if you're a marathon major, you got to be up there in terms of the scoring overall. We'll do this exercise with the rest of the majors. We're going to put a pin on this for now. We're going to keep this structure in place. When we do previews for the other marathon majors, we'll put it through this through the ringer as well. Okay, so you got it. 82 for Alex, 80 from Caitlin, and 91 from me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like the teacher in high school you want, because I'm just giving you like easy marks.
You're the bird course. Never would
That's
have
right.
guessed
I'm
that.
The
rocks
bird
for
course.
jocks. Yeah, exactly. You guys were expecting me to get like 68.
Yep. I thought you were going to be tougher.
It's a solid C. No one gets an A in my class. No. All right. Let's talk a little bit about how to qualify for this race. I think this is one of the big things that people I've been asked about this in the past. It's a scenario where, okay, you've done a couple of the marathon majors. You have got into New York through the lottery. You've put your name in London a bunch of times. You've not gotten in because it's impossibly hard. You've run Chicago because I think that's the most accessible out of the marathon majors. So you're starting to collect the marathon major medals and you're thinking to yourself, it'd be cool to go to Tokyo. How the heck do I do this? We've done a little bit of digging here. It's still not super duper clear. It seems straightforward enough, Caitlin. There's a basic lottery, right, to enter?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've got a basic lottery this year. There were 300,000 applicants for 2025. And as we mentioned earlier, we had what did I say the number was?
37,500 entries.
Okay. So we've got that. The entrants you have to submit your registration between August 1st and August 15th for the year prior, and you find out pretty quickly. I think it's the following month whether you get in or not. But again, it's really tough. Yeah, it's not your almost 900,000 in London, but still 300,000 for the 37,500 spots. Not that many. You also do have the qualifying times for the men and women, but then now we're talking about really fast runners, right? To be able to get in there a little easier, you got to have under a 228 for men and a 309 for women. So, you've got to be really fast if you want those qualifying times to help you.
Yeah.
That's
so
like one of the biggest letdowns, I think, of marathoning that people don't realize until they get into the sport is that these major marathons, unless you're, call it a sub-elite runner, are hard to get into. Like there's so much luck involved in actually getting a spot on the line.
Yeah, I kind of wish now I'd done Tokyo like many years ago, because it wasn't, I don't think there was a lottery when I first started running marathons, and now there is. I would say that's probably a little bit harder than a 1 in 10 chance to enter, because if it's 300-ish thousand people that entered the lottery last year, we'll say it's something along the same lines going into next year. They're not offering all 37,500 slots through the lottery.
Right.
There's 3,700 entries for charity runners, which I guess is a legitimate avenue for you if you don't want to enter the lottery. You've entered in the past and you've not gotten in, and you're just like, screw it. I want to do Tokyo. I'm going to pay about $1,000 to support a charity, which is obviously a great thing to do. And so they keep 10% of the slots open for charity runners as well. And there's a few other entries as well who've raised the most amount of money for charity and have decided not to just put up the $1,000. They want to just, it's kind of like a weird competition they've set up here with like top 300 fundraisers in this category get an entry as well. And then there's 1,000 other entries as well for charities where you have to raise over like about $2,000, about $1,900 equivalent in US dollars. So there's those charity avenues. They're expensive. Mm-hmm. So you're looking at a lottery. August 1st is your entry date for the following year. There's a window of 15 days. Mm-hmm. Then that closes, a couple of weeks to organize things. And I think it's right around September 1st. They let you know whether you're in or not. Okay. The elite race. Alex, a little smile just appeared on his face. What we've been waiting for. Let's talk about the elite race this year. It's an intriguing elite race. I would not say it's going to be the best elite race of the year. It's not going to be the fastest marathon of the year, I don't think. But I think there's some really interesting storylines here. One character in particular, there's my teaser, which we'll get to in a second. But let's talk about the women's race first. So, women's course record run by Ethiopia's Sutume Kebede last year. She had a hell of a year last year, and she's coming back to run this race. She's the headliner. She ran 2:15:55, stellar performance. Won her first marathon major last year after setting the American soil half marathon record in Houston in January. She just went on a heater last year. I mean, it was a real breakthrough year for her. So she has got to be, I'd say, guys, she's got to be the woman to beat in the women's race.
Is she?
Oh, here we go.
Oh, yeah.
Alex.
I have two cases against Kebede, and if I had to bet, I might choose Kebede, but you need to mention her two main competitors. So on paper, the fastest runner, if you discount the years in which her times were run, is Bridget Kosgei of Kenya.
Right.
Once upon a time, when the women's world marathon record went completely haywire, she was the woman to beat. In fact, you could even call her the first one to really send that marathon record into a nosedive when she ran 2:14 low in 2019. So she was like the pre-COVID queen. The issue is that she hasn't been able to reproduce it, not even close, since then. However, it's not that she hasn't had any good performances since then. She won Tokyo in 2022. It's just time-wise, we haven't seen a 2:14 out of her. So if she's in that 2019 shape, she will be very difficult to beat. And then there's Tigist Katema, who's maybe the most raw out of this list of contenders. She won Berlin just last fall, and up until last year, she was a miler.
Right. That's a big jump in terms of distance to make from 1 mile to 26
to the marathon. She also did she win Dubai as well last year? She had a couple wins, I think.
Yes, she did. Yeah, she had a great breakout year last year. So, I mean, on paper, Tokyo can say, hey, listen, we've got some of the fastest runners in the world running right now, running our event. We've got a bunch of former champions showing up to contest. We've got the defending champion who had a breakthrough year last year, because lest we forget that Satsume Kebede also finished second in Chicago last year. So if you remember that world record that was run by Ruth Cheptegei in Chicago last year, I mean, obviously all the attention, rightfully so, was on her. But for the first 8 or 10K of that race, there was another woman hanging on for dear life.
Right.
And it was a 2-person race, and that was Kebede. And then she did end up finishing second place. So she hung on, even though she went out super hard in the first 10K. Often that produces a really horrible end result, often a DNF when you do something like that. But in her case, she held on and ran a really good time. So really tough competitor, and had a very good year last year. And also, I think, Katelyn, for us oldsters, got to be rooting for Turnish Baba. Okay. If you're of a certain age and are a track fan, you will know, I can't believe I'm saying this. I feel so old. Turnish Baba, one of the true goats on the track, very similar to Kenenisa Bekele in terms of career up to a certain point. She was so dominant in the 5,000 meters and the 10,000 meters, multi-medalist in the Olympics, really seemed like she was on a trajectory to become one of the great marathon runners when she pivoted to the marathon. She hasn't run a marathon since 2018. She stepped away from the sport for a while, had a family, and is re-entering. She's got a PB of 2:17 from 2018. She's now 39 years old. I have no idea what she's got left, but I will definitely personally be rooting for her. She's also got the coolest nickname ever, which we've mentioned on the pod once before. Do you guys know what it is?
I do.
Say it, Alex. I forget the baby. What is it?
The baby face destroyer. Is
Yes.
that it?
Yeah.
The baby face
right.
destroyer.
What a terrifying nickname that is.
It is.
It's like a wrestler. Okay. So that's the women's field. Let's do picks, because we're going to definitely be watching this live together, and we're going to do an instant reaction podcast, and we might put something together as well for the live coverage where we can have a live watch hangout that we put on our YouTube. We stream on YouTube. We're going to give that a shot. See how that goes, technically speaking. So let's put our money where our mouth is. What do you got, Alex? Who's your pick for the women's side?
At the end of it, I'm going to go with Kebede. I just think that she's on such a hot streak. Dropping a 64 for a half shows crazy speed, and she's been there before. She won last year, so I actually think she's going to repeat.
Okay.
Katelyn?
I'm going to root for Dibaba, like you're saying, Michael, but we don't know what's going to happen. We can't make her our top pick, right? So I will counter Alex and go with Kosegi.
You're going Kosuke. Okay.
Kosuke,
Okay.
sorry. Kosuke.
Going Kosuke. You're thinking that she's going to find that old magic.
Yep.
That's a risky pick. I like it. I'm going to go. I'm going Satsume Kebede as well. Alex,
Okay.
I'm going chalk. I'm picking the obvious one, but I just feel like she just had such a good year last year. She seems like she's really got a good command for the marathon. She like kind of like just deposited Sifan Hassan in her rear view, the Olympic marathon champion in Tokyo last year. She's an impressive runner. I think she's going to continue the breakthrough here in 2025. Okay, the men's field.
All right.
Pivot into the men's field here.
This is interesting.
We have Benson Kipruto. defending champion,
Mm-hmm.
sixth fastest marathoner of all time, coming back. This guy has sneakily become one of the real marathon running goats. Think about this. This guy has won the Boston Marathon. He has won the Chicago Marathon. He has won the Tokyo Marathon. That, my friends, is 3 of the now 7, it was 6 world marathon majors. That is one heck of a resume. And he also snuck in there on the podium in Paris and won a bronze medal for Kenya. He is one consistent and impressive marathon runner.
Mm-hmm.
I would say he is the headliner. He's got a 2:02:16, which is the course record in Tokyo that he ran last year. He is in his mid-30s, so he is,
A mature,
shall we say,
marathoner?
maturing. Maybe he is like a fine wine. But we shall see how his 2025 goes. Deresa Galeta of Ethiopia, who is also one of the fastest marathon runners in history. He's a 2:02 man himself. He is the 7th fastest of all time. He's racing. And Baranu Lagese is your other 2:02 runner and is the 9th fastest of all time. However, he has not produced a result of that magnitude in some years. So
Mm-hmm.
those are, I would say, are your 3 headliners. Alex, do we see anybody else on that men's field that might be interesting to watch?
You gotta scroll down, and you should scroll down.
It's way down.
So
Way down.
sitting there quietly with a, let's call it humble personal best of 2:08:59 is none other than your 10,000 meter and 5,000 meter world record holder, Joshua Cheptegei of Uganda. He's only has the one marathon to his name that didn't quite go the way he had planned. That was his debut. He's about to pop something off, right? A 26 low 10,000 meter runner, faster on the track than anyone in history. The Kipchoges, the Bekilis, everybody. He's got to be able to run something quicker than a 2:08 high. And I'm guessing that it'll be here. I'll share my predictions in a second, but I can't wait to see the Cheptegei storyline. And the other thing, and this is maybe a little bit less obvious when you look down, but start looking at the nationalities. We have a somewhat predictably cluster of Japanese athletes in that 2:05 range. So Yohei Ikeda, Suguru Osako, Ichitaka Yamashita, and Kenya Sonoda. So they're all in that 2:05 range. And that's kind of special because that national record must be sweating. So 2:04:56 is the Japanese record to beat. It was set by Kengo Suzuki just in 2021, so it's a fairly recent record. I would go and bet that record's going down because there's a lot of Japanese firepower there.
Yeah, they will definitely have, like, if you're going to watch along in the live stream, as we will be, they will definitely have a camera on that first group of Japanese runners and whomever else decides to join along in the fun, because they will be going after the national record in which is 2:04:56. I'm going off the top of my head here, Caitlin.
Yep.
I think that's
Yeah,
correct.
that's it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, wow, I can't believe I know the Japanese national record off the top of my head. This is sad. But yeah, I would say I don't think that means good things for me. I would say that record will be contested, which will be exciting, and it'll be a big deal in a country that is obsessed with distance running. And one thing we've not actually mentioned yet at all, and this is a very important factor in terms of like race experience and course with Tokyo, is because Japan views distance running like Americans view the NFL, there will be like 10 deep on the sidewalks watching this race. It is going to be bananas at certain points on the course in terms of spectator representation, spectatorship, for lack of a better term. So the elite race will be super exciting to watch, watching the stream, watching the like level of excitement in the city for that race, especially for the Japanese athletes. That'll be cool to watch. But definitely, obviously, a secondary storyline for our purposes here. I think for me, all eyes are on Joshua Cheptegei.
Yep.
I mean, last year, the big headliner last year in Tokyo for this race was Eliud Kipchoge. He had a tough time, and it was kind of like you were watching Eliud Kipchoge's dominance come to an end in real time during that race, and they actually kept a camera on him for quite a while as he like drifted back in the race. I'm not sure if they're going to do the same thing for Joshua Cheptegei in terms of like dedicating a camera to him, but I hope they do, because I want to see what he does. I hope he does well. I hope he's the next great one. He's such an intriguing figure, such a likable, amicable character, in certainly on the track and hopefully in distance running for many more years to come. He's mentioned that he's, I think, retired from the track. So we kind of need this to pan out well for Joshua Cheptegei to keep showing up and racing. Okay, guys, who do you think wins here? So we've got 3 guys who've run 2:02.
Mm-hmm. And there are 11 sub 2:05 runners.
That's a lot.
That's a lot.
That's deep.
Yeah. That's a
in
deep
an
field.
era where a 2:05 is nothing.
Right.
It's still good. But we've got 3 of the top 10 fastest runners of all time on the start line, which is impressive. And then we've got Joshua Cheptegei, who I would categorize as maybe the first or second most tantalizing marathon running prospect.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly right now, he's like one of the top marathon running prospects ever. Because he's just like, he's got sub 2 hour marathoner written all over him and in his DNA, literally, except for the whole fact that he struggled in his first marathon.
That was just a practice. It was a fluke. It was a fluke.
I love your optimism.
I know.
Okay,
and you guys know I would be the worst betting gal, because if I'm going to choose, I want to go with Cheptegei, even though he has absolutely zero reason for, of course his world records, but in the marathon, he's got zero experience, and I want to go with him. So I know that I'm going with the underdog, someone who's not going to make it, but I'm going to go with him because I'm optimistic and I want to root him on.
Oh, man,
picking Cheptegei. Okay, Alex, what do you got?
I respect that, Katelyn. Like, I kind of toyed with it. I think this is Cheptegei's race to go like 2:03 or 2:04, hang off the back of a couple other guys and just massively improve his marathon PR, gain some experience, and then maybe next year he comes back and crushes it even more. But I think this is going to be Benson Kipruto's race to lose. Even if the times are similar with the other the fellow 2:02 athletes, Kipruto just, I think, has even more vintage to him. I think he's like, well, Mike, you said it, right? He's becoming one of the GOATs. He gets how to run a major. I have trouble choosing someone who isn't him. I think he's peaking right now. He's might be in his mid-30s, but he seems to be at the prime of his career. So I'm going Kipruto.
Michael?
I'm taking the lazy pick as well, Alex. I'm going with you. I'm going Kipruto for the repeat. He's a very good tactical marathon runner. If you followed the race last year, as I did, he was very smart in how he ran the second half of that race and figured out a way to come out on top ahead of a very tough competitor in Timothy Kiplagat, who ran side by side with him pretty much almost to the end. He knows how to win these big races and these big moments. I agree with you. I think and hope that Cheptegei has a really good race and runs makes a big step forward that's confidence inducing for him and exciting for us as fans of the sport. I want to see him like third place, 2:03.55 or something like that. Would be a really exciting step for him, but I just don't see him being someone who's going to kind of outsmart Kipruto at where, this is where Kipruto lives, right? Is in the marathon. So I'm going Kipruto.
Okay.
Although Gilletta is a sneaky character as well. And I don't think Lagesse has a chance in hell. But okay, there we go. So we got 2 Kiprutos and a Cheptegei. I love your bold pick.
Fields. I know in both fields it's 2 against 1, but that's okay. Well, it's okay. I'm going to stick to my guns.
I hope you prove us wrong in both cases, because it would be good for running overall to have these variety of characters in the sport. Last thing, live streaming. We are putting out a story on marathonhandbook.com everything you need to know about the Tokyo Marathon, which will include, and we will update right to the final moments before the race starts, how you can watch the race in various parts of the world, be it streaming or broadcast. I do not think it has a broadcast partner in North America, although I could be proven wrong on that. So check our show notes and check that full everything you need to know story that we're going to put out, complete guide to the Tokyo Marathon. Last year, FlowTrack live streamed it. It requires a subscription. It's not cheap, but if you're a fan of the sport, it's probably worth investing in because they cover quite a few distance running and track events. So you do get good bang for your buck once the season starts going, the marathon running season. But we will update with a link in that story. And if you don't want to follow or want to more casually follow along, check our homepage where we'll be doing some live blogging of the event throughout the event. And also take a look at our YouTube channel. Hoping we'll put together some sort of like a live watch along hangout. And very well may be Alex, Katelyn, and I sitting in a hotel room or a hotel lounge with a camera pointed on our face, talking about what we're seeing and watching. But hey, that could be fun. And we're going to jump on for a instant reaction podcast, unpacking the elite races, the experience of the marathon right after it's done. And we'll put it out in the podcast feed and on YouTube right away on Saturday night, Eastern time, Sunday morning, Tokyo time. All right, guys. We did it. That's it. It's time. On to Tokyo.
On to Tokyo. On to
And
Tokyo.
on to
I can't
Boston.
wait.
And on to Boston.
Yes.
And on to Boston. Don't forget to come visit us if you're in the Boston area
Good plug.
this coming weekend. Yeah.
There you go.
And you want to see us live, what we actually look like, how tall
we are.
Everything.
We're
Our
all
sense of style.
4'11". Yes.
Or lack thereof.
Our sense of style. I will be bringing, there will be some swag. I think we're going to have a few hats to give away, a few exclusive special edition Marathon Handbook Boston themed hats
Ooh,
that I'm waiting for the courier to drop on my front door right now. And then we will pack and bring with us to Boston. And we're also going to do something similar for the Boston Marathon weekend as well, because our whole team is going to be in Boston covering the Boston Marathon. So we'll be doing some special stuff there as well. So that's what we got in front of us.
Awesome.
Check out our newsletter. Goes out every single day of the week. 230 something thousand people have subscribed to it. So you should too. And please give us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Our podcast is now on video format on Spotify as well as YouTube. So check out those platforms as well if you like to use them. And subscribe to our YouTube channel for video versions of this podcast and shoe reviews and experiential stuff. And just we're doing all kinds of stuff like multiple times a week on YouTube right now. All right, gang. See you in Boston.
See ya.
Later.